I kind of knew that I was different for a while, but I didn't know exactly why. In other words, the males around me, because again, here you are 10 and 12, whatever, preteens, people are getting whatever hormones. It was not uncommon for people that I was growing up with to see a woman and all of a sudden like they're scanning her body, you know, like how big are her boobs, what's her butt like and stuff. It's like, I was never like that. You know, all the people that I ever had relationships with, I was attracted to them because of their personality, who they were, you know, were they fun, you know, what were their values and all that. This whole business of bodies evaluating, that was like, huh? You know, I mean, that wasn't me, you know, and that was just one example of ways I was so disconnected, you know, from this tribe that I was supposedly stuck in. So even though I knew about this time I was 7th or 8th grade that I was transgendered, for me it was never the only thing because I had other fish to fry. Pomona, the town that I grew up in, it was a segregated city at that time. That was a city where you were penalized if you spoke Spanish in school. In the south part of Pomona, by the time I was getting old enough to realize, there was drug abuse in that neighborhood. There was 2 gangs in town. Out of my 8th grade class, the number of people out of that class who became incarcerated, who had children out of wedlock, is pretty huge, you know? I could see what was happening around me, you know, and I was clearly not going to become a statistic. So I was going to do whatever I possibly could as a poor kid just to be serious, do well in school. For some reason, I came out being this resilient, kind of bulletproof, going to survive at all costs kind of person. So my parents were Mexican-American, you know, conservative Catholic, Republican was kind of my context, right? My dad was in the military. He was a master sergeant in the Army Corps of Engineers in World War II. So I was raised very much kind of like boot camp style, you know? A place for everything in its place, you know? He'd be alcoholic, he'd abuse my mom sometimes. So as I said, in that context, I kind of learned like, oh, there's some things you don't bring out in the open, you know? Even though deep down I kind of knew like, well, this is pretty dumb, you know, I can see kind of the life that I want among the women around me, but I can't have it, right? Things changed when I went to Santa Cruz because UC Santa Cruz was this totally different world. Feminism, women's studies, you name it, right? So there was more room up there to ponder like, you know, wow, you know, you're like 7-hour drive from LA. You've left all that behind. I started presenting as female because I was living in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm away from campus. There weren't any of these power structure type people I had to deal with, right? So I basically did that for the next 7 years. Again, my deal was to show that I could, you know, present as whatever, but as long as I was getting my work done and publishing papers and working with students, you know, it's like, it doesn't really matter now, does it, right? If I deliver the goods at the end of the day. The challenge that I had is I didn't know how this was going to play here at this religious institution. And again, I was playing for keeps now because I wanted a permanent job. I still had to navigate this business of being around science faculty. In other words, if you look at faculty at universities, who are the most open-minded? They're not these people, you know? But now they were part of the power structure that could vote on me for tenure and so forth, right? So what I did, not that I was happy about it, is I put away presenting as female for 11 years. The professoriate is mostly populated by people who don't have a clue, you know, about sort of the challenges you know, the students in their classrooms often face. Now, so the point is, students would figure out pretty quick, wherever I went, at all these jobs that I had, that I was not that way, you know? And that I had been there, you know? People would come in here forever, close the door and cry sometimes because they got a comment from some engineering professor and they're a woman in engineering, whatever. Somebody living in South Central LA, their cousin was shot. You know, they wouldn't tell other faculty, they would tell me, you know, because they knew I was different. So I had this trailblazing story of helping people in need or neglected or people that people didn't get the time of day for, to like, yeah, you can do it too. Come on, let's get busy, you know? I was really good at helping these people realize their dreams and go places, right? But at some point, it became an honesty issue for me because, you know, as much as I was helping them be successful in all that stuff, be true to your dreams and stuff, I wasn't doing that for myself. So in 2010, in the summer, I just kind of had enough, you know, with kind of like this pretending thing. And so I started gradually, you know, like presenting as female. You know, in the first semester or so, I was kind of like, what kind of teaching evaluations are going to get, you know? And there really wasn't anything much, you know? And it's like, whoa. Students were very supportive in the sense like, you know, oh, okay, well, this is cool. And then it's kind of like, oh, what size are you? You know, I mean, people would give me stuff. You know, people's moms got involved in the business of, you know, what is she like? So I'd have students who'd come and do my makeup. And they would compete for like, you know, oh, you asked her, not me? Oh, come on, you know. The first summer that I was doing this, the dean of my college came over here one day, you know, and he hardly ever comes to this building, you know, and he comes in and, you know, he says, oh, could I talk to you? It's like, okay, I'm in the lab with students. We come in here, he closes the door, and he said he'd had faculty apparently from this building complaining. The complaint was, oh, this person's using the men's restroom, right? See, that brings up the whole issue of where does LMU have single-sex restrooms, you know? And there's actually one in the basement, so at some point I started using that just to avoid this craziness. He said he was going to do what he could as a dean to support whatever I decided to do, which was really cool. I think because faculty could see that students were so on board with it, that they kind of had to get on board as well. One of the challenges that I've had is kind of like, what is Catholicism's view on people that are trans? See, the things that I like about certainly the Jesuit aspect of Catholicism is the fact that they're devoted to men and women for others, you know, serving the underserved, the neglected, and so forth, you know, justice issues. I'm all, yo, okay, this is my milieu, I belong here, right? But I'm also who I am, and I want to be with a woman, you know. That's another issue. It's like, what does the church say about same-sex relationships? Not positive things necessarily. You know, it's kind of like, okay, you're gay or lesbian, but as long as you don't act in it, you're okay. I still obviously am committed to all those things that led me to be wanting to be at a Jesuit school in the first place and to come back and teach at one. You know, that hasn't gone away. So the only thing that's kind of put me in this nebulous situation is kind of like, well, what are they going to do about me? You see the physical changes, oh, boobs start developing, what have you, hair grows slower and stuff. Your muscles change because you have less testosterone, you become weaker, you know. Your pores in your skin become more narrow, your skin gets softer, there's body fat distribution. All that stuff is like, whoa, amazing, you know. You reach and touch yourself and realize, whoa, that skin is like really different. It's like, yeah, that's you. Remember, you're the same person. It just trips you out, right? But as I said, it's the arrival of the emotional, mental kind of things that's like, for me at least, that was like, oh my gosh, you know. I mean, I never used to get sad and cry and stuff. I mean, you know, hardly ever, you know. Now if I see, you know, hear a National Public Radio segment that touches me, within a few minutes it's like, you know, da-da-da, something's happening, oh, I better get tissues, you know. Being this way as I am now is like so much coming home. Again, if you grew up with my dad, Mr. Master Sergeant, you don't show emotions, you know? That's not allowed, basically, right? So I'm way more happier in a way deeper way than I ever was before. If you look at people that are trans and you look at the statistics, you realize the number of folks that drift into depression, drift into attempted ending their lives is pretty high compared to the normal population, you know? So I knew by 2010 or so, if I didn't do something about this, you know, I might find myself similarly going downhill. It's like, no, I don't want to go there. Because my wife and I have been drifting apart for a long time. She's not really happy with what I'm doing with transition. Before the year was over, we started living in separate rooms. I mean, she had a hard time when I was doing this in the 90s, but when I started doing it for keeps here at LMU, you know, that was like, oh my gosh. How you looked in people's eyes and being embarrassed was a huge thing. When my 25-year-old, when she graduated, it was made pretty clear that if I went to the graduation, no one else would come. It was stuff like that, kind of like, why do I want to keep being with someone who's like the embarrassment issue? You know? The reality is, since that graduation event last year, I've kind of grown distant, you know, more so, kept more to myself. You know, look, I'm here 7 days a week. I don't go on vacations. I have no friends of my own age. When I go home, many times, my wife is in her room with the door closed. My daughters are upstairs in their room on the second floor. And the kitty cat comes to see me, you know? And this didn't start overnight. In other words, I just found it appalling that my wife would just like, you know, here's a plant that's wilting, you know, and oh well, da-da-da, you know, okay. It's like, you know, hello. I just thought it was kind of like odd, like, can't you see that I'm still the same person, fundamentally? Those things that attracted you to me a long time ago, they're not gone. I look different, you know, I act a little different, but those core values are still there. That's why I did this, because I thought if I'm going to go forward in this situation, I have to do something for me, or I'm going to go drift into those deadly zones. And part of this is I think they take after my wife's example to some extent. You know, this context of tension, I think that kind of discombobulates my older daughter to some extent. Kids grow up with this image of, oh, when they're old, there'll be trips to grandma and grandpa's house with our grandkids, and there'll be Christmases together and stuff. I mean, she knows that that's going to be not exactly what she imagined, you know? And I think that bothers her, because we've never had a conversation, you know, like, just let's go out and think about how this is going to work, you know, like, look, your mom and I are not going to be together, but as to what kind of relationship we want to have, we should talk about that. My dad passed away in 2007, before I came out, and I never told him about any of these other things I had done in the 90s. My mom didn't know about anything either. She had a stroke 2 years ago. She's now in an assisted living facility in Claremont. Her stroke made her lose the ability, she can't speak anymore and she can't use one of her arms. I started on hormones in 14 and I started on electrolysis on my face in 13. I haven't seen her very often in that period of time, and the 1 or 2 times I did, it presented as male because I didn't know what she was going to think. I haven't been to see her in several months because I'm not going to present as male anymore, and I didn't know what she would do. So over Christmas break, what I did is I took a lot of pictures and I put them into basically a photo album of pictures of me during 2014. I also put a 3-page single-space letter in there saying, like, you know, Mom, we never talked about this kind of thing. You know, I don't know if you want to hear this, but you know, I'm transitioning to female, because she got really emotional at parents, and she indicated that, yeah, she did want to see me at some point. So if you look on the shelf up there, you'll notice that there are pictures of couples on the bottom. That's called the wedding shelf. So students who work for me or take my classes, if I get to know them, they know at some point that they'll probably have a place on there. Then if you look to the next shelf, you notice there's the baby shelf. Remember, this is a lifelong relationship we've got going here. I feel so lucky to work with students every day because my vision of this job is kind of like the following. In my view, God is kind of like this block of ice, okay? You have one of these ice sculptors that's shown up to do some, you know, we're going to make something at, you know, Vegas or whatever, okay? And they get busy chopping away at the ice. And you get all these shards flying around the room. To me, students are those shards because they're a reflection of the divine. And so I feel so privileged to be kind of like coaching God's people in a way, you know? Because in other words, whatever judgment happens to me later on, I'm kind of going to remind the judging person there, like, by the way, take a look, you know, I was kind of like your talent development coach, and you're like a, you know, Major League Baseball team, you know? I ran your farm system. Look at all the people I put on your team there up in heaven, you know? It's like, cut me some slack, you know?